Act 1, the aftermath of Lashley's mother passes away, and his older sister, Annie, returns from another city to support him. Harry, still a teenager, is struggling with the loss and his immaturity, and Annie, concerned about her brother, decides to stay and help him navigate the difficult days ahead. However, her stay brings its own challenges. As they try to cope with the grief, Annie notices that Harry's emotional state is unstable, and he's becoming fixated on a girl who lives next door. One afternoon, Harry is staring at the neighbor's daughter from the balcony, lost in his thoughts. Annie, walking in on him, begins to ask questions. Harry insists it's nothing, he's just admiring her cuteness, but Annie can sense there's more to it. It's clear Harry's feelings might be getting more complex than he understands. Act 2, emotional tension builds in the days that follow. Annie decides to help her brother with his crush. She wants to help him gain confidence, but their relationship begins to blur. Harry, in an attempt to connect, hugs his sister, which stirs uncomfortable feelings in both of them. Annie is taken aback, but instead of confronting it, she distances herself from the situation and retreats to her room. However, Harry's emotional attachment to her deepens, and Annie becomes increasingly concerned. Annie, in an attempt to ease the tension, calls her boyfriend Derek and invites him over for a reunion. A group of friends gathers for a night of drinks and chatter, but Harry is withdrawn, his eyes constantly following Annie. He's not interested in the party or the distractions, they all seem distant compared to the growing emotional pull he feels towards her. Annie notices this but remains silent, unsure of how to handle the situation. As the night progresses, Derek stays behind, and Annie leads him to her bedroom. Meanwhile, Harry watches them from a distance, silently struggling with his feelings. The next morning, Annie tries to brush off Harry's behavior by telling him about her night with Derek, trying to shift his attention away from her and toward the girl next door. Act 3, confronting the obsession that is Harry's fixation grows. He confesses to Annie that he wants to pursue a romantic relationship with the neighbor girl. But Annie, visibly shocked, tries to explain the boundaries of their family dynamic. She reassures him that their connection as siblings is sacred, and that acting on his emotions with her would be harmful. Still, Harry's feelings continue to escalate, and Annie, desperate to distract him, hires a professional to help him experience intimacy in a healthy way. However, when the moment arrives, Annie becomes jealous and asks the woman to leave, realizing she still isn't sure how to let Harry go. Later, a tutor named Jack arrives to help Harry catch up on schoolwork. Annie finds herself drawn to Jack's maturity and kindness, and as their connection deepens, Harry becomes increasingly agitated, unable to control his emotions. When he sees them together, it sparks a confrontation, and Harry reacts violently, attacking Jack out of jealousy and confusion. Annie, furious and heartbroken, slaps Harry and tells him he must leave. She returns to her own life in another city with Derek, trying to distance herself from the toxic dynamics that have developed. But Harry, desperate and emotionally destabilized, shows up at her door days later, begging her to let him stay. Feeling sorry for him, Annie agrees, but the tension between them remains. Act 4, the breaking point as time passes. Annie and Derek try to rebuild their life together, but Harry's obsession intensifies. One night, as Annie and Derek are intimate, Harry watches from the doorway. Annie catches him, enraged, and tells him to leave. But Harry, overwhelmed by loneliness and desperation, begs her to understand that he has no one else. Annie, emotionally manipulated by his plea, reluctantly lets him stay. Eventually, Annie marries Derek, but the unresolved tension between her and Harry lingers. Their relationship becomes strained as Harry continues to show unhealthy attachment to her. One night, after confessing his longing for a connection with her, Harry pushes Annie to a breaking point. In a moment of weakness, Annie gives in to his plea, but the consequences are devastating for both of them. Annie's guilt and confusion become all-consuming, and she must ultimately decide how to navigate her love for Derek while protecting herself and Harry from further emotional destruction. Epilogue. The road to healing the story concludes with Annie seeking therapy and support to help her understand the trauma and emotional manipulation that has shaped her relationship with Harry. Harry, too, begins counseling to work through his obsessive tendencies. The family, broken but healing, begins the long road toward recovery, acknowledging that some relationships, even those rooted in love, can be toxic without the right boundaries.